My name is Muniba Mazari, and I want to share something with you today. Something that took me years to understand, something that cost me everything I thought I wanted, but gave me everything I never knew I needed. I want to talk to you about finding your true purpose, not the purpose others expect of you, not the purpose society tells you to have, but the purpose that lives deep within your soul, waiting to be discovered. Moves closer to audience. Let me start with a question. How many of you woke up this morning knowing, with absolute certainty, why you're here? How many of you can look in the mirror and say, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do with this one precious life I've been given? Don't worry if you can't raise your hand. I couldn't either, for the longest time. You see, I spent the first part of my life trying to fit into boxes. The box of being a perfect daughter, the box of being an ideal wife, the box of living up to everyone else's expectations. I painted my dreams small because I thought that's what was expected of me. I thought purpose was something you stumbled upon by accident, not something you had to fight for, dig for, sometimes even bleed for. And then, on one ordinary day in February 2007, everything changed. I was in a car accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down. In an instant, all the boxes I had so carefully constructed around myself shattered. The life I thought I was supposed to live, gone. The future I had mapped out, erased. The person I thought I was, unrecognizable. A pause's voice becomes more intimate. I remember lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, and asking myself the most terrifying question a human being can ask. Who am I now? Because you see, when you lose everything you thought defined you, when the ground beneath your feet literally disappears, you're forced to confront something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You're forced to confront your true self. But here's what I learned in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the smell of antiseptic. Your purpose isn't found in your circumstances. Your purpose is found despite your circumstances. Your purpose doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from what you choose to do with what happens to you. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." And lying in that bed, I realized I had a choice. I could let this accident define me, or I could let it refine me. Walks to other side of stagey, we live in a world that's obsessed with perfection. Instagram feeds full of filtered faces and curated lives. LinkedIn profiles that read like fairy tales. Everyone presenting their highlight reels while hiding their behind-the-scenes struggles. And somewhere in all this pretending, we've forgotten something crucial. It's not our perfections that make us powerful. It's our imperfections. It's not our strengths that define our purpose. It's how we transform our wounds into wisdom. I want to share with you the story of a young girl named Malala. You probably know her name. At 15, she was shot by the Taliban for advocating for girls' education. She could have let that bullet silence her forever. Instead, she used her pain as a platform. She used her suffering as a springboard. Today, she's the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner in history. Her purpose wasn't born from her comfort. It was born from her crisis. This is what I want you to understand today. Your purpose isn't hiding somewhere out there, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Your purpose is often hiding in the very places you're most afraid to look. It's in your pain. It's in your struggles. It's in the experiences that broke you and forced you to rebuild yourself stronger. Returns to center stage. After my accident, I went through what I now call the great unraveling. Everything I thought I wanted from life had to be examined. Every dream had to be questioned. Every assumption about what was possible had to be challenged. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. Because here's what happens when you lose everything. You discover what can never be taken away from you. Your creativity, your compassion, your courage, your capacity to inspire others, your ability to love, your power to choose how you respond to life's challenges. I discovered that I had been living someone else's definition of success. I had been chasing someone else's version of happiness. I had been trying to fulfill someone else's purpose. And the accident, as devastating as it was, gave me the gift of clarity. It stripped away everything that wasn't essential and left me face to face with who I really was underneath all the expectations and assumptions. A voice becomes more passionate. So let me ask you this, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you pursue if you weren't afraid of what others might think? What impact would you make if you stopped waiting for permission to be yourself? Because here's the truth about finding your purpose. It's not a destination you arrive at. It's a journey you embark on. It's not something you find once and keep forever. It's something you choose to live every single day. I started painting after my accident. Not because I was particularly good at it, but because it was the one thing that made me feel alive again. Every brushstroke was an act of defiance against despair. Every color I mixed was a declaration that my life still had meaning. I painted from my wheelchair, and suddenly, I wasn't a disabled woman trying to fit into an able-bodied world. I was an artist expressing her truth. And you know what happened? People started responding to my art. Not because it was perfect, but because it was authentic. Not because it followed all the rules, but because it came from a real place. My paintings weren't technically the best in the world, but they were mine. They were honest. They were born from struggle and painted with hope. A moves toward audience again. This is what I learned about purpose. It's not about being the best. It's about being true. It's not about having all the answers. It's about asking better questions. It's not about never falling down. It's about how you get back up. Let me tell you about a man named Nick Vujicic. He was born without arms or legs. As a child, he attempted suicide because he couldn't see any purpose in his existence. Today, he's one of the most sought after motivational speakers in the world. He's married, has children, and has touched millions of lives. His purpose wasn't found in spite of his disability. His purpose was found because of it. His limitations became his liberation. This is the paradox of purpose. It's often found not where you're strongest, but where you're most vulnerable. Not where life has been easiest, but where it's been most challenging. Not in your successes, but in your failures. Not in what you've gained, but in what you've lost and how you've responded to that loss. Pauses for reflection. I remember the first time I spoke publicly about my experience. I was terrified. My hands were shaking. My voice was trembling. I thought, who am I to give advice to anyone? I'm just a woman in a wheelchair trying to figure out her own life. But then something magical happened. People connected with my vulnerability more than they ever connected with my strengths. My brokenness became a bridge to their healing. And that's when I realized something profound. We don't inspire people by being perfect. We inspire them by being real. We don't change lives by pretending we have it all figured out. We change lives by sharing how we're figuring it out as we go. Your scars are not signs of weakness. They're proof of your strength. Your struggles are not reasons for shame. They're sources of your power. Your failures are not the end of your story. They're the beginning of your comeback. A voice becomes more intensely. But let me be clear about something. Finding your purpose is not about positive thinking alone. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's not about slapping a smile on your pain and calling it healing. Real purpose is forged in the fire of authentic struggle. It's born from honest confrontation with your deepest fears and greatest challenges. I spent months in physical therapy, learning to navigate the world from a wheelchair. There were days I wanted to give up. Days when the mirror showed me someone I didn't recognize. Days when I wondered if there was any point in trying. But purpose isn't found in the easy days. It's found in the days when you choose to keep going even when you don't want to. It's found when you decide that your story isn't over. It's just taking an unexpected turn. Let me share with you a story from Japanese culture. When pottery breaks, instead of throwing it away or trying to hide the damage, they practice something called kintsugi. They repair the broken pieces with gold, making the repaired piece more beautiful than it was originally. The cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted, they're celebrated. The brokenness becomes the beauty. This is what finding your true purpose looks like. It's not about pretending you were never broken. It's about letting your cracks be filled with gold. It's about understanding that your healing can become someone else's hope. Your comeback can become someone else's catalyst. Your breakthrough can become someone else's breakthrough. Walks across stage slowly. I want you to think about the people who have impacted your life the most. Were they the people who had it all together? Were they the people who never struggled? Or were they the people who had been through something difficult and came out the other side with wisdom, compassion, and strength? I'm willing to bet it was the latter. This is why your pain is not pointless. This is why your struggles are not in vain. This is why your challenges are not just obstacles to overcome, but opportunities to discover who you really are and what you're really capable of. After I learned to paint from my wheelchair, I started getting invitations to display my work. Then I was asked to speak about my journey. Then I was approached about modeling. Me modeling! The woman who thought her life was over was being asked to model for fashion brands, not despite my wheelchair but with it. Because my story resonated with people who had their own struggles, their own challenges, their own feelings of being different or left out. It stops and looks directly at audience. But here's what I want you to understand. Purpose isn't just about finding what you're meant to do. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. And sometimes, who you're meant to be is revealed not through what comes easily to you, but through what challenges you. Not through what you're naturally good at, but through what you have to fight to become good at. I was never supposed to be a motivational speaker. I was shy, introverted, someone who preferred to blend into the background, but life had other plans. My accident forced me out of my comfort zone. It pushed me to find my voice. It demanded that I share my story, not because I wanted to, but because others needed to hear it. And that's another thing about purpose. Sometimes it chooses you more than you choose it. Sometimes you're called to do something not because it's what you dreamed of, but because it's what the world needs from you. Sometimes your purpose finds you in the most unexpected places, during the most difficult times, through the most challenging circumstances. A voice becomes more encouraging. Let me ask you something. What if your biggest struggle is actually your biggest qualification for your true purpose? What if the thing you're most ashamed of is actually the thing that could help the most people? What if your deepest wound is meant to become your greatest wisdom? I think about Oprah Winfrey, who transformed her childhood trauma into a platform for healing millions. I think about Maya Angelou, who used her painful experiences to write some of the most beautiful and powerful literature in history. I think about Nelson Mandela, who turned his 27 years in prison into the foundation for reconciling an entire nation. These people didn't succeed in spite of their struggles. They succeeded because of them. Their purpose wasn't separate from their pain. Their purpose was born from their pain. Their challenges didn't disqualify them from making a difference. Their challenges qualified them to make a difference that no one else could make. Moves to new position now. I know what some of you might be thinking. Muniba, that's easy to say, but how do I actually find my purpose? How do I know what I'm supposed to do? How do I discover what my life is meant to be about? Let me share with you some practical wisdom I've learned along this journey. First, stop looking for your purpose and start living purposefully. Purpose isn't something you find by sitting in a room thinking about it. It's something you discover by engaging with life, by serving others, by paying attention to what breaks your heart and what fires you up, by noticing what comes naturally to you and what you have to work hard to develop. Your purpose is often found at the intersection of your passion, your skills, your values, and the world's needs. But here's the key. You don't have to wait until you have it all figured out to start living it. You can start living purposefully right now, with what you have, where you are. The gestures to audience, look around this room. Every single person here has something unique to offer the world. Every single person here has a combination of experiences, insights, talents, and perspectives that no one else has. Your purpose isn't about being someone else or doing what someone else is doing. Your purpose is about being authentically, unapologetically you. But being authentic isn't always easy, especially in a world that profits from your insecurities. There are billion-dollar industries built on making you feel like you're not enough as you are, not smart enough, not successful enough, not beautiful enough, not accomplished enough. And the message is always the same: you need to be someone else to have value. But I'm here to tell you something to Ofrent. I'm here to tell you that your value doesn't come from your achievements. It doesn't come from your appearance. It doesn't come from how much money you make or how many followers you have or how impressive your resume looks. Your value comes from the simple fact that you exist. Your worth is inherent, not earned. Your purpose is not about proving your value. It's about expressing it. Pauses for emphasis. When I was going through my darkest days after the accident, a friend shared with me a quote from Rumi: "The wound is the place where the light enters you." At first, I hated that quote. I didn't want my wound to be meaningful. I just wanted it to be healed. I didn't want my pain to have purpose. I just wanted it to go away. But over time, I began to understand what Rumi meant. Our wounds, our struggles, our challenges, they crack us open. And yes, that cracking open is painful. But it's also where the light gets in. It's where compassion develops. It's where empathy grows. It's where wisdom is born. It's where purpose is revealed. Think about it. The people who have the most compassion are usually the people who have suffered the most. The people with the most wisdom are usually the people who have made the most mistakes. The people with the strongest faith are usually the people who have faced the greatest doubts. The people with the deepest capacity for joy are usually the people who have known the depths of sorrow. Off walks to center stage. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering. It means we shouldn't waste it when it comes. It means we should let our challenges change us, but not break us. It means we should let our struggles make us stronger, not bitter. It means we should let our pain become our purpose, not our prison. I remember a conversation I had with my daughter. She asked me, "Mama, do you wish you had never had the accident?" And I had to think about that for a long time, because the honest answer is complicated. Do I wish I hadn't gone through the pain? Absolutely. Do I wish I hadn't lost the use of my legs? Of course. But do I wish I hadn't discovered who I really am? Do I wish I hadn't found my true purpose? Do I wish I hadn't learned to see beyond the surface of things? Do I wish I hadn't developed the compassion and strength that now allow me to help others? No, I don't wish that. This is the paradox of growth. Sometimes we have to lose our lives to find them. Sometimes we have to fall apart to come together. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to discover what we actually need. A voice becomes more reflective. You know, I've met thousands of people in my journey as a speaker and artist. And I've noticed something interesting. The people who seem to have the clearest sense of purpose are not necessarily the people who have had the easiest lives. They're the people who have learned to extract meaning from difficulty. They're the people who have learned to transform their mess into their message. They're the people who have learned to use their tests as their testimony. Let me tell you about a woman I met at one of my talks. She approached me afterward with tears in her eyes. She told me that she had been feeling purposeless for years. She was in her 50s, recently divorced, children grown and gone, career feeling stagnant. She felt invisible, irrelevant, like her best years were behind her. But as she listened to my story, she realized something. She had been through a difficult divorce and had learned so much about resilience, self-reliance, and rediscovering herself. She had raised children and developed incredible patience and nurturing skills. She had worked in corporate environments and understood the challenges people face in professional settings. All of these experiences had given her a unique combination of wisdom, compassion, and practical skills. 6 months later, she contacted me to tell me she had started a support group for women going through life transitions. She was using her experience to help others navigate their own challenges. She had found her purpose not by looking forward to some grand future calling, but by looking back at what she had already overcome and realizing how she could use those experiences to serve others. Moves closer to audience. This is what I want you to understand. Your purpose doesn't have to be grand or globally significant to be meaningful. It doesn't have to change the whole world to change someone's world. It doesn't have to be your full-time job to be your full-time calling. Purpose can be found in small acts of kindness, in quiet moments of service, in simple expressions of your authentic self. Maybe your purpose is to be the teacher who sees potential in the student everyone else has given up on. Maybe your purpose is to be the friend who listens without judgment when someone is going through a difficult time. Maybe your purpose is to be the parent who breaks generational cycles of pain and creates new patterns of love. Maybe your purpose is to be the artist who creates beauty in a world that sometimes feels ugly. Maybe your purpose is to be the entrepreneur who solves problems others don't even see. Your purpose doesn't have to look like anyone else's purpose. It doesn't have to fit into conventional categories. It doesn't have to make sense to everyone else. It just has to make sense to you and align with who you authentically are. A pauses and looks around the room. But let me be honest with you about something else. Living your purpose is not always easy. In fact, it can be quite challenging. Because when you start living authentically, when you start pursuing your real calling, when you start being who you're actually meant to be, not everyone will understand. Not everyone will support you. Some people might even try to discourage you. When I started painting and speaking, there were people who told me I should focus on getting better instead of playing around with art. There were people who questioned why I was putting myself out there. instead of staying quietly at home. There were people who thought I was seeking attention or pity. There were people who didn't understand why I couldn't just be grateful to be alive and stop pushing for more. But here's what I learned. Other people's opinions about your purpose are just noise. They're distractions, they're irrelevant. The only opinion that matters is your own, and if you're spiritually inclined, your creator's. Everyone else is watching your life from the outside. They don't know what fires burn inside you. They don't know what dreams whisper to you in the quiet moments. They don't know what your soul is calling you to do. A voice becomes stronger. And here's another thing, sometimes the people closest to you will be the most resistant to your growth. This isn't because they don't love you. It's because your transformation threatens their comfort zone. When you start living purposefully, it holds up a mirror to those who aren't. When you start taking risks to pursue your calling, it highlights the risks others are afraid to take. When you start being authentically yourself, it makes others question whether they're being authentic too. This is why finding and living your purpose requires courage. Not just the courage to face your fears, but the courage to face other people's fears. Not just the courage to risk failure, but the courage to risk success. Not just the courage to be rejected, but the courage to be accepted for who you really are. Because sometimes being accepted for who you really are is scarier than being rejected for who you're pretending to be. When people reject your facade, it doesn't really hurt because it's not really you they're rejecting. But when people accept your authenticity, when they embrace your real purpose, when they see value in your true self, that's when you realize you've been hiding for nothing. That's when you realize you could have been living this purposefully all along. Walks to different position. Let me share with you another story. There's a man named Sean Swarner, who is the first cancer survivor to climb Mount Everest. He was given 2 weeks to live when he was 16 years old. He survived not one, but 2 different types of cancer. He had his left lung removed. By all conventional wisdom, he should have lived a quiet, careful life, grateful just to be alive. Instead, he decided to climb the highest mountains on all 7 continents. People thought he was crazy. Doctors told him it was impossible. But Sean understood something about purpose. It's not about what you can't do. It's about what you must do. It's not about your limitations. It's about your liberation from the belief in those limitations. Sean's purpose wasn't to prove anything to anyone else. His purpose was to prove something to himself, to prove that cancer had not conquered him, to prove that his limitations did not define him, to prove that he could choose to live boldly despite having every reason to live fearfully. And in the process of living his purpose, he became an inspiration to millions of other cancer survivors and people facing seemingly impossible challenges. His purpose wasn't just personal, it became universal. His individual healing became collective hope. Returns to center. This is another crucial aspect of purpose. It's both deeply personal and beautifully universal. When you live your authentic purpose, you're not just healing yourself, you're healing everyone who witnesses your journey. You're not just fulfilling your own potential, you're giving others permission to fulfill theirs. You're not just solving your own problems, you're showing others that their problems can be solved too. This is why your purpose matters more than you might realize. This is why the world needs you to find it and live it. This is why you can't afford to stay small, play safe, or hide behind excuses. Because when you live purposefully, you create ripples of possibility that spread far beyond what you can see or imagine. I think about all the women who have approached me after my speeches, women who were in their own wheelchairs, facing their own challenges, dealing with their own struggles. They tell me that seeing me on stage, painting with purpose, speaking with passion, living with intention, it showed them what was possible for their own lives. It helped them see beyond their circumstances to their potential. But it's not just people with disabilities who connect with the message. It's anyone who has ever felt broken. Anyone who has ever felt like their dreams were too big for their circumstances. Anyone who has ever wondered if their struggles had meaning. Anyone who has ever questioned whether they had something valuable to contribute to the world. A voice becomes more intimate, you see. We're all dealing with something. We all have our own version of a wheelchair. Maybe it's financial struggles. Maybe it's relationship challenges. Maybe it's health issues. Maybe it's mental health battles. Maybe it's addiction. Maybe it's trauma from the past. Maybe it's fear of the future. Maybe it's just the deep, Persistent feeling that you're not living up to your potential, that there's something more you're supposed to be doing with your life. Whatever your wheelchair is, whatever your limitation appears to be, I want you to know something: it doesn't disqualify you from purpose. It might actually be the very thing that qualifies you for your unique purpose. It might be the very thing that gives you the compassion, the strength, the wisdom, the perspective that the world needs from you specifically. Your struggles are not a bug in the system of your life. They're a feature. They're not accidents or mistakes or punishments. They're assignments. They're curriculum in the school of becoming who you're meant to be. They're the raw material for your purpose. Pauses for reflection. But I want to address something else that might be holding you back from finding and living your purpose. The voice that says, "Who am I to think I can make a difference? Who am I to think my life can have significant meaning? Who am I to pursue something bigger than what I've always done?" That voice is not your friend. That voice is fear masquerading as humility. That voice is insecurity pretending to be wisdom. That voice is the enemy of your purpose. The real question is not, who are you to make a difference? The real question is, who are you now to make a difference? You are here, on this planet, at this time, with your unique combination of experiences, talents, perspectives, and passions. That's not an accident. That's an assignment. Nelson Mandela once said, "There is no passion to be found playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living." Playing small doesn't serve the world. Playing small doesn't honor the gifts you've been given. Playing small doesn't help anyone, including yourself. A voice becomes more passionate. The world doesn't need another person playing it safe. The world doesn't need another person settling for mediocrity. The world doesn't need another person hiding their light under a bushel. The world needs you to find your purpose and live it boldly. The world needs you to use your pain as power. The world needs you to transform your wounds into wisdom. The world needs you to turn your mess into your message. And yes, it's scary. Yes, it's uncertain. Yes, you might fail. But you know what's scarier than failing at something that matters to you? Succeeding at something that doesn't. You know what's more uncertain than pursuing your purpose? Living without one. You know what's worse than failing while trying to make a difference? Never trying to make a difference at all. Let me tell you about another person who discovered purpose through adversity. Her name is Elizabeth Smart. At 14, she was kidnapped from her bedroom and held captive for 9 months. She endured unimaginable trauma. She could have let that experience define her as a victim for the rest of her life. Instead, she chose to let it define her as a survivor with a mission. She became an advocate for missing children and victims of sexual assault. She turned her nightmare into a platform for helping others. She used her voice, the same voice that was silenced during her captivity, to speak up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Elizabeth's purpose wasn't revealed in spite of her trauma. Her purpose was revealed through her trauma. Her healing became other people's hope. Her recovery became other people's roadmap. Her courage became other people's catalyst. Moves to new position. This is what I mean when I say your purpose is often hiding in your pain. I don't mean that suffering is good or that we should seek it out. I mean that when suffering comes, and it comes to all of us in one form or another, we have a choice about how we respond to it. We can let it make us bitter or better. We can let it break us or remake us. We can let it be the end of our story or the beginning of our purpose. I want to share with you a Japanese proverb that has guided much of my thinking about purpose. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. This isn't just about resilience. It's about understanding that falling down is not the opposite of success. It's part of success. It's not the enemy of purpose. It's the pathway to purpose. Every time you fall and get back up, you discover something new about yourself. You discover reserves of strength you didn't know you had. You discover that you're more resilient than you thought. You discover that you can survive things you never thought you could survive. And each of these discoveries becomes part of your preparation for your ultimate purpose. Pauses and looks directly at audience. But let me be clear about something: finding your purpose is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of who you already are. It's not about adding layers of personality. It's about stripping away the layers that don't belong to you. It's not about changing your fundamental nature. It's about expressing your fundamental nature more authentically. When I started painting, I didn't become an artist. I realized I had always been an artist. The accident didn't give me creativity. It gave me permission to express the creativity that had always been there. The challenge didn't create my purpose. It revealed my purpose. This is why the journey of finding your purpose is often more about uncovering than discovering. It's more about remembering than learning. It's more about coming home to yourself than going somewhere new. Think back to when you were a child. What did you love to do? What came naturally to you? What made you lose track of time? What did you dream about? What did you create? What brought you joy? Often, the seeds of our adult purpose were planted in our childhood passions, before the world told us what was practical or possible or profitable. I remember as a child, I loved to create things. I loved colors. I loved beauty. I loved expressing myself through art, but as I grew older, I was told that art wasn't a real career, that I needed to focus on more practical things. So I buried that part of myself. I put my creativity on the back burner and focused on being what others expected me to be. It took a life-changing accident to give me permission to return to that creative child inside me. It took losing everything I thought I wanted to rediscover what I had always loved. It took being broken to remember who I was before the world tried to shape me into someone else. Voice becomes gentler. Maybe you've had a similar experience. Maybe you've buried parts of yourself because they didn't seem practical or profitable or acceptable. Maybe you've spent so much time trying to be what others expected that you've forgotten what you actually want. Maybe you've been so focused on surviving that you've forgotten what it means to thrive. If so, I want you to know it's not too late. It's never too late to come home to yourself. It's never too late to uncover your true purpose. It's never too late to start living the life you were actually meant to live. But here's something important to understand. Your purpose doesn't have to be your profession. It doesn't have to pay your bills to be valuable. It doesn't have to be your full-time job to be your full-time calling. Some people are blessed to make a living from their purpose. Others live their purpose alongside their living. Both are valid. Both are valuable. Both can be deeply fulfilling. What matters is not how you structure your purpose, but that you honor it. What matters is not whether you get paid for your passion, but that you make room for it in your life. What matters is not whether your purpose is big or small, recognized or hidden, but that it's authentic to who you are. A walks across stage. I want to talk for a moment about the relationship between purpose and service. Because I've noticed that the people who have the clearest sense of purpose are usually the people who have found ways to serve others. This doesn't mean you have to be in a traditionally service-oriented profession. It means that purpose is often found when we shift our focus from what we can get to what we can give. When I started painting, it began as personal therapy. It was about my own healing, my own expression, my own recovery. But when I started sharing my art, when I started talking about my journey, when I started using my experience to help others, that's when my painting became more than just personal therapy. It became my purpose. The shift from self-focus to service focus is often the bridge between having a passion and having a purpose. Passion is about what moves you. Purpose is about how you move others. Passion is about what you love. Purpose is about how you share that love with the world. This doesn't mean you should ignore your own needs or sacrifice yourself for others. It means you should find the sweet spot where your gifts meet the world's needs. It means you should discover how your healing can become someone else's hope. It means you should explore how your growth can contribute to someone else's growth. A stops and faces audience directly. Let me ask you something. What breaks your heart about the world? What problems do you see that others might ignore? What injustices make you angry? What needs do you notice that aren't being met? Often, your purpose lies in the direction of your righteous anger. Often, the thing that breaks your heart is the thing you're meant to help heal. For me, it was seeing how society views people with disabilities. It was witnessing how limitations are often seen as disqualifications rather than qualifications. It was experiencing how people with challenges are often pitied rather than admired for their strength. My heart broke for all the people who were hiding their struggles instead of using them as sources of wisdom and inspiration. So I decided to be visible. I decided to share my story. I decided to model what it looks like to thrive despite challenges rather than just survive because of them. I decided to use my platform to change conversations, shift perspectives, and expand possibilities for others. That became part of my purpose, to show that brokenness doesn't disqualify you from beauty. that limitations don't have to limit your impact, that your struggles can become your strengths, if you choose to see them that way. A voice becomes more encouraging. What breaks your heart? What problems do you see that you feel uniquely equipped to address? What experiences have you had that have given you insights others might not have? What challenges have you overcome that could help others overcome similar challenges? Your purpose might be waiting in the answers to those questions. Your calling might be hidden in your concerns. Your mission might be found in the intersection of your pain and your passion, your struggles and your strengths, your wounds and your